ticklish business any way you look at it. Come on, we'll stick together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Ticklish Business. I'm Krista, joined as always by Emily, and this month we are kicking off the first of 3 travels around the international film world, because we're doing International Month again. You might have remembered last year we did our inaugural International Month and did Elevator to the Gallows. I forget what the other one was we did. Was
it 8.5?
Oh, it was 8.5. Yeah, so we did all that last year, had a lot of fun with it, decided to bring it back this year, and I was just telling Emily, we picked some doozies for the next 2 episodes. My choice for our cinematic journey this year was taking us to Germany for 1929's Pandora's Box. We won't spoil what next episode is. And then the final episode was all voted on by the patrons, and we will announce what won that poll in the next episode. But in the meantime, we are going to Germany to talk all about G.W. Pabst, Louise Brooks, Jack the Ripper, and Pandora's Box. Not the Pandora you know, but the Pandora you don't know. But before we get into that, we just like to briefly remind everyone that if you haven't checked out our Patreon at patreon.com/ticklishbiz, you should. We have actually been doing a lot of stuff to try to keep that incredibly active, as Emily and I are both in the midst of writing books. We do additional bonus pods, including doubled features looking at remakes, based on a true podcast looking at biopics and true crime, as well as But Have You Read the Series? If you head over right now, as I mentioned, you can vote in our International Month poll, where the choices are Lestrada, Kind Hearts and Cornets, and Umbrellas of Cherbourg. There's a clear-cut winner right now. Not my choice, though, which I was really bummed about, because I don't know, Emily, did you have a choice in the poll that you wanted to see win?
I will not be sad with whatever wins.
Interesting. We also have a bunch of episodes that we just introduced. We did our But Have You Read Daisy Miller, looking at Peter Bogdanovich's 1974 adaptation of Henry James's novella. We had a lot of thoughts about that movie. Is it still a Bogdanovich vanity project? The answer is yes, but you should also go listen to the episode and hear more about what we said. We also did our latest doubled features finally on 1934's Death Takes a Holiday and 1998's Meet Joe Black. So those are both up there now, and we are recording the next batch soon, trying to keep things fresh, just so you all get the most bang for your buck. We also give out regular care packages of movies and gifts and let you guest on an episode. That is at patreon.com/ticklishbiz. And don't forget that Emily and I are both authors. You can read her Viviana Valentine series, all of which are out right now, as well as my book, But Have You Read the Book? 52 Literary Gems That Inspired Our Favorite Movies. We recommend you order those wherever you get books. And our Redbubble store has some fabulous art that you can put on everything from stickers to mugs to shower curtains, all designed by Samantha Ellis and Terrence Hiltz, featuring your favorite stars, including our always popular Makoko mugs. You can find those at ticklishbiz.redbubble.com. So we're going international. We're going to Germany. We're talking about G.W. Pabst's Pandora's Box. This is a movie that literally defies explanation in many instances. It's the story of a woman named Lulu, played by Louise Brooks, who is possibly a sex worker. I think it's definitely
likely.
A sex worker.
Yeah.
Definitely a sex worker who is engaged in an illicit relationship with a man who is going to get married. Through several machinations, that does not end up happening, and he ends up marrying her. And the entire thing culminates with murder, mayhem, more prostitution, and an untimely meeting with Jack the Ripper.
Sure.
Yeah, I picked a great one to start us off with.
You left out a vital clue, though, is that it's also silent. So, I knew that going in. It's Louise Brooks, but silent, no dialogue.
I picked a whopper for us to start with, a silent German film. So I saw Pandora's Box actually last year because I was trying to get more into silent films and international films. So, I think the one thing that is kind of evident with a lot of classic film fans is that there are usually some significant blind spots because of genre. So some people don't like Westerns and they avoid all Westerns. Some people don't like silent films and they avoid all silent films. some people only watch classic films from America. So I was trying to not be that snarky white American and diversify a little bit. And I decided to watch this. Louise Brooks is infamous in classic film circles, and I really, really enjoyed this. The issue for me on the second time watching it was that if you are watching this, please do not watch it through HBO Max because their print is horrible. It looks really bad, a lot of artificing, like every time the characters move, there's like weird bars on the screen. I don't know if that was just my television. It's never done that before. I've never had that issue with Criterion before. And it was not a great experience. I think that colored it. And I think that's a big thing with silent films. Like you have to see them in the best possible context. There's a mess of silent films on YouTube right now, but they're all with like music that's public domain. So you'll probably watch some film that has Pomp and Circumstance that'll play, or like Happy Birthday. I don't know. You really need to see them. And regardless, I still think this movie is utterly, utterly brilliant. I think Louise Brooks is, if you think that silent film actors are all stodgy, St. Vitus dance type of performers, oh no. Louise is completely modern. And the story is really interesting. I think it's funny that HBO Max has the synopsis that says the story of a woman whose raw sexuality affects everyone around her. That's not really the plot of the movie. And I'm interested to get your take on whether that is the plot of the movie. But overall, I was really happy to revisit this. But then I started thinking, I don't know how Emily's going to feel about this. This is a silent German film. I've just given her and told her with no context, here, we're going to watch this. So Emily, what did you know about Pandora's Box before this? What did you think of it?
I knew nothing about the actual movie, but I knew enough about Louise Brooks where I was just kind of like, oh, this is going to be a very interesting film because of the morality of it and what German movies and German society prefers to show over American films and society. And granted, this is obviously very pre-code, so American films were allowed to be a little bit smuttier in the 1920s than they were anytime later, but also Germans not notoriously prudish. So it was really interesting to get that background in it. I'd never read the play, but I am familiar with a lot of German, plays and literature. I took a really good class in college called The Literature of Continental Europe because my professor was like, believe it or not, you mostly just read British stuff in American school systems. So let's like introduce you to German and French and all that. And that was a really, really good sort of baseline to kind of approach these kinds of movies with. Louise Brooks is so dynamic and so fun to watch. I did actually end up watching this on YouTube, and the music that was put to it was not bad. It was very jazzy. It was very like appropriate for the time. So, it didn't strike me as odd. I did end up watching swaths of it and on like 1.5 times speed because for some reason it does move very slowly. There's a lot of moments where people are just like pacing through an apartment. And if I did not watch it on faster speed, it would have taken 3 or 4 minutes of just someone walking around.
There's a whole like 10-minute sequence of just them setting up a play, like a musical review, like the backstage shenanigans. You're like, what?
Yeah, it's like it doesn't move at like a modern pace or a modern storytelling clip. But once I kind of got over it or found a workaround, I really quite enjoyed it. Everybody is very expressive. The story makes sense for what's happening on screen. As someone who's not super familiar with silent films, and I usually kind of get lost in the weeds when I don't entirely know what's happening, but it all made perfect sense. Louise Brooks is really good at translating her facial expressions and her movements to express what you want to know what is happening on screen. And I really quite enjoyed it.
It's definitely a good entry point into international cinema. I don't know if it's a great entry into silent cinema because it does have those moments of trying to fill time. But when you look at Louise Brooks in this movie, oh my God, she's just so modern. And when I say modern, I just mean that no disrespect to the Lillian Gish fans or the Mary Pickford fans, but they can often become a bit hamstrung by the facial expressions. The ooh, if you looked at my face right now, we're putting out video for this, so you'll see it maybe. But the O mouth, and the wide eyes and the hands over the face. It's a lot of reaction acting. And don't at me with like, if you watch this movie, you won't notice it. But Louise really does feel like if you put dialogue with her, you wouldn't lose anything. She's just so vibrant. And I think what I appreciate is how unrepentant the character of Lulu is in this film, which a lot of it kind of was inspired by Brooks herself. Paps had been trying to make this movie for a while, and he always was looking for an American, and he saw Louise Brooks performing in Howard Hawks's A Girl in Every Port, and he tried to get her from Paramount, and they didn't get back to him. She ended up leaving Paramount because of salary issues, but his second choice was Marlene Dietrich. And the story goes that Dietrich was actually in his office, ready to put pen to paper when Louise Brooks called him and said she would do it. And he pretty much told Marlene to kick rocks and he was going to go with Louise. And honestly, I love Marlene Dietrich. And Brooks's arguments were supposedly she claimed that, Paps didn't really want Dietrich. He felt that she was too old for the part because she was 27. And, Louise Brooks is considered kind of an infamous voice in Hollywood for the fact that she liked to gossip a lot. She ended up living, I think, until like 1985, but she talked a lot of trash about a lot of actors, some true, some untrue. So I don't know how true this story is, but regardless, I don't think Marlene Dietrich would have had the same power as Louise Brooks does, because what you notice right off the bat when this movie starts is that she's got this apartment. She's a kept woman for this guy, Shawn, and this old dude shows up and she says, "Oh, he's my first patron." Which, by the way her face reacts to that line reading and the way the intertitle plays, really funny. But you end up buying that because she has such an effervescence about her that you're kind of falling into that, like, "Aw, okay, fine." You want her to succeed for a long time throughout the entire movie, even when she's eventually on trial for murder, and the camera, the prosecutor's like, "This woman is evil," and the camera cuts to her and she just smiles. She just gives like this smirk, and I love it. I love that her character is not at all afraid to just be herself at all.
The imagery of Louise Brooks with the perfect flapper haircut, she is just the absolute archetype of this style, of this time period and things like that. I just went through the entirety of Miss Fisher's murder mysteries, which anybody who knows me knows how much I love, like historical mysteries. But it's so obvious that that character is based on Louise Brooks, and possibly even this character, that sort of like unapologetic sexuality, the modernism, of course, Miss Fisher has her own money, so that's not really a problem, but like the new man every night and no apologies for it. It's a really sort of grounded place for a rather like frivolous modern telling of what the 1920s were like. Now, of course, this is much dirtier because it was made in the time, so it's scrungy. When she experiences poverty, it is extremely real poverty. And of course, when you write historical books, you almost always just kind of delve into the unrealistic wealth of it all. But 1929, a lot of stuff is happening in Germany, and they don't shy away from it really at all.
No, and if anything, I think Pabst might have drawn heavily from Louise Brooks's own life. She was a Kansas girl. She had a very normal Midwest upbringing, she said, until she was about 9 years old. And then she unfortunately was sexually assaulted. And she said that colored a lot of her relationships as an adult. She felt that she was incapable of love because of the physical trauma that she had experienced. She had a very kind of sadomasochistic relationship with men. And I think that plays a lot in this movie, in the sense that she doesn't really have any love for anybody. It's really just a love for herself. Yet at the same time, and it's such an interesting needle to thread, she's not malicious about anything at all. Even when she's locked in a closet with Shawn during this play, and they're talking, and she's rolling all around, telling him like, she's upset that he's not interested in her. She's not going to perform in front of his girlfriend or his fiance, and they eventually are stuck in an embrace together. You don't feel that she's manipulating the situation to make that happen. It's just the allure of Louise Brooks. If anything, this movie just says that the men are dumb. Like, they're so dumb.
Yeah, she has no like real whiffs of sociopathy until much, much, much later in the movie. I think when they're on the gambling boat and stuff really starts going down, then you're kind of like, oh, wait a second, she might be too manipulative, but she does redeem herself after a little while. And she's also given a plot point of personal risk. And so the desperation and the manipulation makes sense for the character. She doesn't really start to become broad strokes of like evil slut at any point, which American movies probably would have done.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I mean, I don't know a lot about Pabst and German filmmaking at this era. So, a lot of it is kind of learning on my feet. But I think too, when you look at silent cinema of the 1920s, I mean, this is the era of the flapper. This is coming out right at the tail end as we're about to enter the Depression era. And again, I don't know how this manifested in Germany. So I'm just going off of American filmmaking at this point. But to watch a character like Lulu, who is so sexually free and is punished for it, it is very Puritan America. Like, you could see this movie being made, maybe not as overtly sexual, but the end result is still the same. I think what a lot of the flapper characters that I've seen in silent films, you think of something like Colleen Moore, who is very similar in look to Louise, or Clara Bow, when we did our episode on Clara Bow. The American silent actresses of the flapper era, Joan Crawford, too, is another great example. Very hard scrabble young women that pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but the end goal is always marriage. Clara Bow wants to get married, and what is the line, sweet Santa Claus, give me him. Or Colleen Moore in something like Why Be Good is definitely like going out on the town, but the goal is she's doing it to get the guy that she is into. There's a class divide. Joan Crawford was always the scrappy little shop girl, and again, it's about class. And this is pretty much saying that there's really no class divisions, because in reality, a lot of the wealthy men did keep mistresses. And if anything, Lulu's end goal is to keep that financial security for herself. She's not going out, as far as we know, with other guys until Shawn throws her out and tells her that he's not going to take care of her anymore, which it's a very small change, but it has such fundamental implications for how this movie would have been presented to US audiences.
Yeah, I think as Americans, we have such a very muddled understanding of German culture prior to, started to get really heavy, but prior to the real rise of the Nazi Party. The Great Depression changed everything. It wasn't just an American phenomenon. All of Europe, all of America, pretty much any Western country was hit hard by the banking failure. And so that really was a decisive linchpin in history, and what changed quite a number of rather freewheeling progressive societies to make a hard right turn into really, really evil stuff. And so I think it's difficult for us to really grasp what kind of sociological and socioeconomic changes were happening in 1929. And this is released and made prior to the banking runs, prior to massive banking failures. And so for us to look at German society that is this old, because it was a very long time ago, and to understand the fact that this was a metropolitan, educated, very well off. Think like New York City in the 1920s without prohibition. So that was another moralizing thing that America had that Germany and most other countries did not have. These people were allowed to go out drinking and partying and have mistresses and all sorts of really fun stuff, cavorting stuff. And I think this really brings it. And if you continuously watch this by reminding yourself that this happened, this came out in 1929, it is such an interesting way to remind yourself of like what's new is old and what's old is new. And this is not far removed, even though it is a 100-year-old film.
Brooks herself, we talked about Clara Bow as being this rebel, creating a mold that had not been created yet. And Louise Brooks, we have to also give her her flowers for creating something different, because what most people are probably shocked by is Louise Brooks had been making films since 1925, but she only got her immortality because she didn't make films in America anymore. You know, Louise was really, according to her, screwed over by Hollywood. You know, she made this movie called Beggars for Life that with William Wellman. And supposedly during the production, she had this one night stand with a stunt guy who ended up going to the set the next day and spreading this false rumor that she had a venereal disease and had hooked up with Jack Pickford, who gave it to her, and pretty much like, this is high school all over again. Just spread it to everybody. And it made her time on that set really difficult because she was supposedly, you know, close friends with Richard Arlen, who was a close friend of her then husband, and it ended up kind of deteriorating a lot of the tensions on set. She also almost died in this moving train stunt. And then after that, she began making the Canary murder case, and she was hanging out a lot with William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies in San Simeon. And allegedly, according to her, she hooked up with Davies' niece, Peppy Lederer, still one of my favorite names ever, who had numerous relationships allegedly with men and women. And supposedly Hearst and Davies found out about the relationship and had Peppy Lederer committed to a mental institution. And Peppy Lederer ended up committing suicide by jumping out the hospital window. And supposedly all of this happening so quickly together really did traumatize Brooks and make her very disillusioned with the Hollywood crowd. And she also didn't get a raise from Paramount, so she decided to go overseas to Europe to work with Pabst. And it wasn't necessarily her going to Europe that kind of made Hollywood turn against her. It was the fact that she didn't want to come back and do retakes for Canary Murder Case that caused the studios to blackball her and not want to work with her after that because she was difficult. And all of that happening in such a short amount of time to a young girl who had already been sexually assaulted in her young life. And the fact that she talked about it, you know, whether true or not, to discuss these things in the 60s, the 70s, the early 80s, that is shocking because I think when people find out about old Hollywood stuff now, we're surprised by it. But Louise Brooks, I mean, she wrote her memoirs, Lulu in Hollywood. She talked very frankly about these things. Like, she was just unrepentant. And it was only by going to Europe that her career even lasted. You know, Paramount, I think, said that her voice was unusable for talkies, and they just kind of chalked her up as a victim of silent film transition. And that wasn't true at all. It was all these other things.
Her story of resilience is absolutely phenomenal. She had to make do as a sex worker herself for a very long time. She basically just kept taking notes on people and not necessarily blackmailing people with it, but, you know, certainly trying to weasel and get her way with
whatever
things.
happens with it happened with it, you know?
Exactly. You know, and she ended up later on in life doing quite a lot of columns of like reminiscing about Hollywood and like spilling tea because like a lot of the other people were dead by then. And as we all know, dead people can't sue. So like she just was like, I'm going to outlive all of you, which honestly, good for her. I really like the fact that Pandora's Box itself also has a not obvious, but obviously there, like lesbian subtext as well, which makes me really, really happy. Again, Germans not necessarily or notoriously like squicky about these sorts of things. And again, if you only pay attention to classic cinema between like in the Hays Codes years of like, we're going to pretend like everything in America is fine, you don't understand that gay people were on screen for a very long time. And while it was definitely done for titillation, it wasn't necessarily moralizing.
Yeah, I really enjoy Alice Roberts, who plays Countess Augusta Geschwitz, who is they never really overtly say whether she's Lulu's lesbian lover, but there is a clear infatuation, at least from the Countess's side, for Lulu, and Lulu just kind of goes with it. But to watch that sequence of Lulu on her wedding day, this is at her wedding, and she's dancing with this girl, and it predates, I think by at least a year, Marlene Dietrich in Morocco in the tux kissing the girl, which Morocco I also really enjoy. That is just amazing. And the fact that the Countess is really her strongest ally for a long time. You know, there's that line that she tells Shawn about this is what she has to do, you know, because you've just cast her aside, you know, like there's an understanding there. There is this unity of women that exists. And the fact that, you know, Louise Brooks allegedly had many lesbian affairs, you know, it's very fascinating that the movie presents it in such a, dare I say, positive or at least non-judgmental way about it. Have you become a Ticklish Biz patron yet? Well, you should. Just like Allie Moore, Amy Hart, Danny, David Floyd, Donna Hill, Gates, Jacob Haller, Jonathan Watkins, Krista Painter, McF, Rachel Clark, and Shawn Goodreau. Listen to episodes 48 hours early, watch exclusive video interviews, receive merch, and even guests on an episode. You also get access to bonus series like Based on a True Podcast, doubled features, and our latest series, But Have You Read the Series? We're also giving away a massive prize pack to our 50th patron and doing a special theme in July that we've dubbed Don Johnson July. It all starts at $1 at patreon.com/ticklishbiz. Back to the show. Especially before something like some of the other like early pre-codes, like Wunderbar has a similar same-sex dance sequence and stuff like that, which is great. But I know that upon the release in Germany, Pabst got accused of like making this scandalously horrible version of this play. Berlin critics thought that it was a travesty. The fact that the Countess was a lesbian was also a big deal, and that Brooks was considered a quote-unquote non-actress. They felt that she was too American. And in multiple countries, I mean, the movie was banned outright in like Finland, Norway, and Sweden. It was banned in the Netherlands until like 1930. And there were a lot of different things that were eliminated. So like in France, they totally butchered the film and actually changed the plot to make the Countess like one of Lulu's childhood friends. So they took the lesbianism out. And in the French cut, Lulu's not guilty at trial, and there's no Jack the Ripper character. The film literally ends with Lulu joining the Salvation Army.
They gal-palled like a really good lesbian relationship.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much happening in this that is incredibly fascinating. Honestly, the serial killer at the end is a weird left turn that I would have edited out. It's not great, but I kind of love it at the same time. Like, it's the only time that the movie kind of says, you evil sluts, you're going to get what's coming to you. And it's not until the very end, until Alva has also been corrupted and all the other men have been corrupted. But I really like the fact that they don't punish the Countess. It's not all women who are evil, wanton women. It's just Lulu, which is, I guess, better than other movies have done.
Well, also, I asked this question up top. Do we necessarily think Lulu is a villain? Because up until a certain point, she's really a victim of circumstance. She's been trained, as far as we know, as some type of kept woman. And the guy she meets at the beginning, she says is her father. But there's a little doubt there in terms of if that's true or not. So
there's a lot of lap sitting and smooching, which not necessary. Maybe times have changed, but not necessarily something a grown woman usually does with her pop.
Exactly. So there's that. But once she gets thrown out, you know, she ends up in this situation with Shawn where they end up having to get married. And then once she gets married to him, she doesn't really care about him, but she's, you know, makes a little bit of an effort and just, it doesn't work out. But eventually her and Awa get together which is Shawn's son. There's a issue with a gun, and the gun accidentally goes off, and Shawn ends up dead, and then she's on trial. And the trial situates all of this as premeditated.
Yeah.
And it's not, as far as the audience knows, it's not premeditated at all. This is just how circumstances have transmorgified. And when the verdict is about to be read and they say that, oh, she's going to go to jail for 5 years for manslaughter, it isn't her that makes the escape out of the courtroom. It's her quote unquote dad and Alva who abscond with her.
This is like Keystone Cops level of funny. And I actually loved the whole courtroom setup because while she's explaining, or her lawyer is explaining, that she had to do all of these things and she didn't shoot her husband on purpose and all of these things just happened to her, the men in the sort of courtroom audience are like, what a shame. And all the women are like, yeah, she didn't do any of this. And it's so funny. And so, like, not only does this movie position, oh, she's just so alluring, men can't help but covet her and want to hold on to her and contain her and constrain her and keep her from themselves. Like, the women are like, you can't punish her. She's just doing what society made her do. And it's so funny. And like everyone in the entire courtroom, aside from like the judge and the prosecutor, work together to like abscond her out of the courtroom. And it's so funny.
It really is. And it's why I can't necessarily say her character is a villain, because other people, she's crafted this community of people that genuinely want to help her. You know, they want to. And even when she ends up going to Egypt, they end up absconding to the Middle East, and she does end up engaging in sex work again. The guy trades her as payment for services rendered. You feel bad for her. This isn't seeing, and that's the thing that I think is so interesting about Pandora's Box, is the fact that if this was an American movie, her falling into prostitution would be a concept. Look at how far this woman has fallen. She had it all, and through the error of her own ways, she ends up in this world. That's not what happens here.
Yeah, she makes a very clear delineation herself between being in a relationship with a man who keeps her as a kept woman and being sold to a brothel owner as essentially a sex slave. She's like, that is horrible. That is torture. That will kill me. I would rather die. Versus, no, shacking up with a rich guy and just having him pay for everything is not the same thing to her, which is wildly progressive. I don't think you'd even have most people today making that kind of delineation between like what is, for herself, like air quotes, good sex work versus bad sex work. And she's just like, no, this is convenient and lovely, and I chose this for myself, versus a man selling me for his own debts and profit is a wildly different situation, and I would rather die. She's not evil.
In 1929, the fact that they're even commenting on this, I saw a lot of commonalities. This would be a great double feature, I feel, with Poor Things. In the concept of a woman that is finding her own sexual liberation, and how small little twists to the narrative end up delineating what good sex work is versus exploitative sex work, which is a big thing. And, Louise Brooks had multiple relationships. She was married a couple times. She ended up not having children, which she lovingly referred to herself as Baron Brooks, which I love. Yeah. But when she was still struggling, William S. Paley, who was the founder of CBS, was a boyfriend, and he ended up giving her money to live for the rest of her life. And she said, like, that's what kept me from killing myself at a certain point. These people did not have to do that. But much like Lulu, Louise clearly had a personality that made people want to help her, that made people want to continue to be with her. And that is something that Pabst, I think, just really skillfully utilizes. Even even when she's confronted with Jack the Ripper, and they're sitting down and they're talking, and he's just like, he throws the knife away or whatever. He's like, I'm not gonna kill this one. This woman's nice to me. This is great. Like, and she takes pity on him. He's tragic looking and all of this. And it's only through and all I want to talk about whether we're like absolving Jack the Ripper of culpability here, but it's only through conveniently finding a knife in the house that he's like, well, crap. Gonna have
Gotta
to
do what
murder
you gotta
this chick. Exactly. I don't know how you feel about that whole like Jack the Ripper third act, which again in France, England, and America was not present. The original American version of Pandora's Box that was released here was 66 minutes. So this is 2 hours and 11 minutes, and it ends with Louise joining the Salvation Army. So none of that happened. She lives happily ever after in the Salvation Army, like Sister Sarah from Guys and Dolls.
I was gonna say, and then she meets Marlon Brando in 20 years. And and she gets drunk in Cuba.
God, we don't need to talk about Dancing Brando. Maybe we will talk about Dancing Brando at one point. But I don't know. How do you feel about Jack the Ripper popping in? And do we say he's not a villain either?
I think it's hard to say that a guy who stabs a woman who he's making out with is not a bad guy. The compulsion, I suppose, in a 1920s Freudian concept of compulsion and the need to stab things, yeah, sure, but he's like conflicted the entire time. And it's like, once again, you can not stab someone, but I guess no. It's such an interesting comparison to all the men up until now have just wanted to have sex with her, but he's got to stab her because that's his release. And it's just like, don't put this on her. Don't put this on Lulu. No, it's all of y'all that are making a mess. Even down to, I was going to say earlier, like, I would argue that all of the problems literally start with Alva telling his dad that he has to marry Lulu, even though Alva's been coveting her for God knows how long. It's like, all of this is because Alva can't just like be honest and take his dad's ex-girlfriend. All the men and their compulsions. That's what's the problem here.
I'm going to bring it back to our good friend Edith Wharton. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So are we saying that she's kind of a Lily Bart-esque figure, that this whole thing could have been avoided had the dude just not been like, I feel I'm just gonna ponder this for a little bit and like, you'll hang around, and when I make a decision, I'll let you know.
I think every guy who has ever used the phrase friend zoned needs to watch Pandora's Box, because Alva's like, oh no, she's having sex with everyone but me. And it's like, Alva, have you tried to have sex with her? And the answer is probably no. Like, even your sister's getting in on it, because it's the blonde, the Countess is his sister, I think. I don't
Are
recall.
they related?
I think they're siblings.
I didn't get that at all.
Oh,
but it would not surprise
me.
I kind of like that better though now. Some weird like incesty type of like weird
there's like not only is like father and son lusting after the same girl, but I think the Countess is also involved in, and I think she's also related. Maybe I'm entirely making that up and misread like a caption. That being said, Alva, grow a spine. Do something. And all of it is because the men are covetous and have weird Freudian obsessions. And that's, I think, where the Jack the Ripper probably came from. It's definitely out of left field. I was like, no, I understand that she, air quotes, has to be punished. But, Jack the Ripper, really?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and the fact that Louise Brooks herself said that she was sexually liberated. She was unafraid to experiment. She, according to her biographer, she had a clear preference for men, but she never really shied away from rumors that she was a lesbian, mostly because it kind of enhanced her feminine mystique. And I think that that's what makes Pandora's Box endure, is how indelibly it's connected to Louise Brooks's personality. To the fact that she did call herself Lulu, as her career would go on. She'd make another movie with Paps called Diary of a Lost Girl, which I have not seen, but I've heard is equally interesting. And I really do want to see it. But it does she makes me think of a lot of the other silent film stars of the era you know, you look at Lillian Gish and Mary Pickford, and not to denigrate either of them, but their aura, their persona was as angelic angels, child women for Mary Pickford. And that was huge box office, but it really does adhere to this kind of Puritan American way of living that was being established to contrast with the hedonism of the flapper era. And even when you got women like Clara Bow and Colleen Moore, their persona was more, they were wild and rebellious, but it was couched in the safety of the film world. Even though Clara Bow had a very rough and tumble upbringing, and was kind of considered low class, she wasn't overly educated and stuff like that, the audience doesn't know that. And for Louise Brooks to wear that as a badge of honor for so many decades, she really is this raconteur for women in the 1920s. If you're watching silent film and you're looking at the actresses and you're thinking like, God, they're just so straight-laced and the films are just so overwrought, check out Louise Brooks's German films, because that they are beautifully filmed too. I know I joked when we did our Meet Joe Black episode about how it's beautifully shot, but that's just covering up for the fact that it's bad. This is beautifully shot, and it's just enhancing how beautiful the movie itself actually is.
Yeah, when you were talking about Mary Pickford, the first thing that also popped into my head was, obviously we did Funny Girl recently, and Fanny Brice is doing vaudeville at this time as a baby. She's literally a grown adult wearing like a onesie and like licking a lollipop
with the pacifier and stuff.
Yeah, they're baby women, and it's so bizarre and creepy if you think about it for more than 3 seconds. And then Louise Brooks is a woman. She's just a straight up woman, and she's unapologetic about it. She's modern in every way. She's paying her own bills however she can. And it's really, really fascinating. And to put a woman doing woman things in the really modern settings that she's in this movie, like the apartment that she's kept in is absolutely stunning. Bits of like German Bauhaus like design and things like that. It's gorgeous. And again, I really like the fact that they keep it contemporary. They are not putting her in some stodgy, Napoleonic carved wood oppressive castle. She's a modern woman living in a modern city with a modern man who spends modern money on modern things. And they are telling you, this is happening around you now. Start feeling your feelings about it, because these people. And they don't try to hide. They don't try to put any sort of like artificial facade on Lulu or the men around her.
Gottlieb Hesch is uncredited for the costumes here, and the costumes are just fantastic.
Amazing.
The wedding dress with the high-low skirt in the back and that drop waist, which is very 20s. Her courtwear. I have never, since like Lindsay Lohan when she was on trial, I have never looked at somebody's court fashions and been just like, damn, like the black silk, I think it's silk outfit that's on the cover of the Criterion with the veil and the hat, and she just dramatically lifts the veil up and you see the face of the devil, which is Louise Brooks's beautiful face. It's just utterly amazing. And I mean, it's worth pointing out that this year also marks and it's the same year, the 95th anniversary of Mary Pickford's talkie debut in Coquette, the film that she would finally talk in and play an adult. And that movie is often considered one of the worst movies of Mary Pickford's career. And we haven't talked about that. I'm very interested in us coming back to talk about silent films, because there's a lot of iconic silents that are hitting milestones this year in 2024. It took Mary Pickford almost a decade to play an adult woman. She cut her hair off. She's wearing drop waist gowns, and people were just like, no, Mary, we want you with the ringlets, and we want you playing Alice in Wonderland, and how dare you take this away from us? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's no different to how we are treating a lot of actresses now. And like, one of the things that everybody is bemoaning right now, like, who's our movie stars? Who are the people that like people are supposed to be connecting with? And a lot of them I have noticed, and I'm sure you might be able to correlate this with me, is that a lot of them are people who grew up as child actors. You have the entire Disney Channel set now trying to like being nominated for Oscars, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me. No, you were supposed to disappear as a child actor once you like hit puberty and had to like shave and things like that. But now you have like Zendaya and Austin Butler and things like that. And they're in their late 20s. And a lot of them are still making their bread and butter playing teenagers. And granted, you know, like Euphoria is like rode hard and put away wet teenagers. Like they are really, you know, doing some stuff that I did not do when I was a teenager, but they're still teenagers. And that's something that's really, really weird to me. Actors are honestly not really allowed to grow up. And I find it really gross and really bizarre. And it's very odd to think of that like Mary Pickford analogous to Zendaya right now, because everybody still wants her to be like 14.
I mean, I said this when Challengers came out, that the hardest thing for me to parse was Zendaya playing a woman who was in her late, you know, early 30s. Like I didn't buy that. So yeah.
You know, I think personally, my brain blames a lot of it on the pandemic because these people disappeared for several years when they were, you know, you couldn't do production for a couple years, and then, you know, post-production, things like that delays it. So it's like a lot of these people disappeared when they were like 22 and now they're 27. And there's a huge jump in like maturity between 22 and 27 and what you're expected to be doing on screen. I don't know what the difference was in like the 1920s, why we weren't allowed to have Mary Pickford. I don't know, have secondary sex characteristics, but like, I think that explains a lot of it, why we're reeling and freaking out here in 2024, 100 years later. But please feel free to tell me why you think this is happening, because I find it very bizarre.
I mean, I don't know. I think that, you know, actors are always very interesting in terms of how personas play into things. And my cat, Elliot Stabler, is very fascinated with this topic. But, you know, I think nowadays, because it really has gone back, I think, to the silent era in the sense that, you know, you don't have the ease of understanding who actors are outside of the set. You know, they are now the ones cultivating their persona, and their personal life is curated, right, by them for you, so that you know only what they want you to know. And in a way, it kind of is like a return to the silent era, in the sense that Mary Pickford, when she was dating Douglas Fairbanks Sr., you know, most people didn't know until I think Fairbanks got divorced, you know, that they were even together. And they had been together for a long time by that point. So it has kind of turned back around. Like you were saying, everything old is new again. And it's gone back to that landscape where things are cultivated. And the audience only knows about as much as an actor is willing to give of themselves.
Yeah, it's really weird now to see like headlines on entertainment websites being like they make their Instagram official because they finally shared a photo of them smooching on Instagram. And it's like, first of all, why do you care? Second, as someone who reads these things every day, why do I care? Like, and also like, oh, it's so bizarre how much of this is, again, because you and I were young in the era of like Lindsay Lohan getting chased by paparazzi. She was dating a woman for a really long time. It was like a big thing in order to get photos of them together. And it was predatory and disgusting and awful. I am happy that people are now having privacy, and the hungry, despicable paparazzi that was so popular from like the 80s through like the early 2010s. Like, I'm glad that is waning, but at the same time, like, it is very bizarre how people have been wondering if Taylor Swift and Jason, whichever football player she's dating, are a showmance. Are they actually together? Are they faking it? Can you get out of the 1930s gossip rags? Like, this is so bizarre. Why can't you just let people alone and have agency?
I feel like when people ask that question of which classic film star would do great on Twitter, Louise Brooks, I think, would be great on all social media. All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She'd be posting nudes to Instagram. She would have an OnlyFans, like how a lot of people, she really would. And she'd be like, it's not going to be as spicy as you think, but you're going to see some boobs.
I could I can see all this. That was actually perfect. Overall, I mean, I Pandora's Box is not for everybody. It is a German silent film. But I do feel that we need to be talking about Louise Brooks in the grand pantheon of like best silent film actresses. I think she's utterly amazing in this movie. She's so fun to watch. She's so magnetic. She's just amazing. And even if the movie doesn't work for you, the plot, it's hard not to be taken in by her performance. And I really appreciate this film and what she did. And I enjoyed this movie a lot. Emily, final thoughts on Pandora's Box?
You know, we talk about being natural on screen a lot. And there are actors that are not natural on screen that I love. I will watch anything that Nick Cage ever did because he's just ridiculous on screen and it's not natural and none of that is normal human behavior. But I love watching Nicolas Cage. He's fantastic. But Louise Brooks, on the other hand, is so natural and so human and so open in her face and her mannerisms and how she interacts with other people. She's so good at touching people and being in the same space as people. And she moves her body in such like a really interesting way and not in the same way that Clara Bow did, because Clara Bow was like really, really athletic and things like that. But this is less I worked really hard at it and more, I'm just natural at doing this. And she's such a resting performer. And for me, someone I really, really enjoy makeup and hair and costuming. And this movie sets so much of the tone and so much of the story with the costuming. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Again, it's long. And if you haven't worked your silent film muscle very much, like in order to like get used to following a story without any dialogue for over 2 hours, chop it up into bits. It's actually like really well segmented because before and after every act, there's a title card. So you can watch it in bits and get used to it. And she's just so arresting. Like I want to watch so many more Louise Brooks movies.
If you broke up watching The Irishman, then you can watch this. That's my whole takeaway. But listeners, you can let us know your thoughts on Louise Brooks, Pandora's Box, any of that by emailing it to us at ticklishbiz@gmail.com. We are also on all social media platforms. We're on X/Twitter at ticklish_biz, as well as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at ticklishbiz. So before we close things out, we actually got a few more responses from our episode on Chinatown talking about LA Noir. These all came courtesy of Patreon that we wanted to share with everybody. Krista Painter said Mildred Pierce, Sunset Boulevard, Harper, and Abandoned with Dennis O'Keefe and Raymond Burr. Debbi Lynne said Double Indemnity, In a Lonely Place, and LA Confidential. And Shawn Goodreau said Double Indemnity. So again, if you have some other LA Noirs that you have wanted us to mention it, and you can email them to us or contact us through social or anything else, we will read them on the next episode. That's going to close out Ticklish Biz for today. As always, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Reviews matter, and we have had 2 so far this year. Oh my gosh, dare we go for 3? I don't know. You can leave them on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can follow me at my official website, KristenKLopez.com, as well as on all social media at KristenLopez88. Emily Edwards, where are you online?
Oh boy, I am lurking everywhere at Ms. Emily Edwards and at MsEmilyEdwards.com.
And remember that our Patreon helps keep the lights on at Ticklish Biz HQ and gives us chances to do all sorts of fun things, like our episode on Daisy Miller, our episode on Meet Joe Black. We have a bunch of other stuff coming, so consider helping us at patreon.com/ticklishbiz. Your support quite literally means the world to us. We also have books out. You can order them wherever you get books. And don't forget, if you ever want to go back and listen to an episode all the way back to episode 1, you can listen to our entire archive free of charge at ticklishbusiness.podbean.com. So we are going to be leaving Germany behind and going all the way to Algiers. Yeah, try to find that on a map. We're going to be talking about the 1966 feature film, The Battle of Algiers. This is Emily's choice for International Month. We'll be back talking about that on July 17th. Till then.